Welcome back to another episode of Have Game Will Travel. I'm your host, Bennett Newsome, also known as Damn It Bennett out in the gaming community, but as the Director of Esports Growth and Development at Full Sail University, I'm super passionate about exploring the diverse world of esports and gaming beyond just skill level. So whether you're a first-time listener or a returning fan, we're thrilled to have you here for this virtual journey through the experiences of industry professionals. So get ready to engage with our guests and learn from their perspectives. Remember to submit your questions in chat and we'll get them featured on this show. But sit back, enjoy the ride, and let's kick off another episode of Have Game Will Travel with my good friend here, Riley Long, who is the NACE Interim Executive Director, and a bunch of other things, man. Let's tell me about it. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh man, how much time do you have here
Yeah,
today? I'll start with a brief introduction. I'm sure we'll get into my background a bit more here, but thanks for having me on the show.
absolutely.
Appreciate the opportunity to chat about my journey. And yeah, currently serving as our interim executive director at NACE, or the National Association of Collegiate Esports. I've been in this role for around 6 months now. I also work full time at Grand Valley State University, a large private school or large public school out of West Michigan, as an assistant director in our recreation and wellness department, with the responsibility of overseeing our comprehensive esports program. So those are the two hats I'm currently wearing. I'm also a new dad, as of a year and a half ago as well.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on being a new dad. That's huge news. So obviously you've had a very long journey in esports. Let's rewind and go kind of back to the beginning. What really got your start, in this space, and what was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, I mean, as many of us, I've been a gamer my entire life, right? Grew up playing Pokemon. I was a big Pokemon kid, but at around 10 or 11 years old, picked up PC gaming. And got into Call of Duty, Call
Yeah.
of Duty 1, Call of Duty 2. And basically, I was a COD kid through and through
Oh yeah.
growing up. So primarily was, just a pub stomper. Started to dive into a little bit of content creation when I got into high school. But really, Black Ops 2 was the game that got me into esports. So Black Ops 2 came with the first ever ranked game mode, queued up for ranked, and kind of the rest is history. Ended up kind of building my own team from there, and getting deep into the Call of Duty scene. Primarily was at the tier 2 level in Call of Duty, back all the way through Black Ops 2 and all the way through Call of Duty Ghosts. So just absolutely fell in love with it. As somebody that grew up playing traditional sports and was also a gamer, it was my perfect cross section of competition and gaming,
Yeah.
and I've been in esports ever since.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And you've had a really interesting journey, from the collegiate side and what you went to school for. I saw that you had done a lot of engineering aspects. Talk to me a little bit about your educational background and kind of that journey as you've gone through that.
Yeah, for sure. So as a lot of us did when we first got into esports, it was a real passion of mine to understand, how do I make this a career
Right.
someday. And the answer was there wasn't many opportunities to do
Yeah.
that, as an 18-year-old kid. So really, I was also a kid really passionate about physics, love math, love physics. So went off to Michigan Tech University for my undergrad while still competing at the time, to start pursuing a mechanical engineering degree. And unfortunately, college esports really wasn't that big at the time.
Right.
The varsity esports really wasn't a thing yet. So there weren't many opportunities for me to play at the collegiate level, but I did start my kind of my academic journey there, pursuing a mechanical engineering degree, which I eventually got. And I did work as an engineer for 5 years while
Yeah.
trying to eventually make esports my full-time job. But there's a long-winded history from really stopping to compete in COD, which kind of happened around my freshman year of college when I had my worst GPA, and realized, hey, I gotta figure out my priorities here. Can't
Right.
keep playing and trying to become a pro while also juggling schoolwork. That's the balance isn't there.
Yeah.
But that started really my journey and getting into the business side of esports.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think like you talk about how the collegiate scene wasn't it didn't exist really, and you're struggling with GPA, but I think that's such a great part of why it does exist now is a lot of students are focused on, hey, I have to do well in school because I want to compete. Like these two things work side by side to encourage that, not only academic, moving forward that in that regard, but also with your career as a professional player, right? So balancing those things very important. But you know, with the engineering degree, like I said, you worked for 5 years. You did some work for Chrysler. It sounds like
Yep.
focusing on you know, engineering from that regard. Talk to me a little bit about that, you know, having a career as an engineer and gaming still being a passion, and what you could do to try to support both of those avenues.
Yeah, I think what could be helpful is I'll kind of talk about how I got into the business side of the space
Yeah.
because when I did work as an engineer, I was juggling both my passion and my engineering job, right?
Yep.
But when I stopped competing, you know, in my undergrad, I've got a younger brother of mine, around 5 years younger than me, and he was around 13, 14 at the time, and he got into Counter Strike, and lo and behold, he was a lot better at Counter Strike than I was at COD. So I quickly realized, hey, that this kid's got a bright future,
Yeah.
and has a real chance of becoming a pro someday. So really started following his journey, and what it eventually that led into is he started climbing the ranks pretty quickly through the Counter Strike scene, and kind of how their ladder in the Counter Strike scene is developed is similar to like European football, where there's a bunch of different tiers you work your way up to get to the pro scene. And eventually, he found himself on a team with some of the best prospects in North America, making it into the Tier 2 league. And the team needed some guidance. You know, this is a team of 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. They don't know what a contract is,
Right.
right? I was no expert, but felt like I could be the adult in the room to help. And that's when I got involved in team management. So really helped that team with contract negotiation, making sure that they were getting the value that they deserved, and just kind of supporting them and being there for them. Eventually, that team made it to the finals of the Tier 2 League, which used to be called the Mountain Dew League back in the day. So we flew out to New York City, and they actually won the whole thing, and became the youngest team to qualify for the Pro League in North America. So that was a really cool experience for me, and obviously my brother as well. You know, as 16-year-old, all of a sudden becoming a pro
Yeah.
was just unthinkable. And I got the opportunity to kind of facilitate a contract buyout between Soar Gaming and Dignitas, which was the first organization that they signed under. So I learned so much just from that experience, understanding how contracts work, understanding like what the salary demands might be in these different games, and really thought that, hey, I want to try to take this skill set, and find a way to make a career out of it.
Yeah.
So after graduating from Michigan Tech, 3 months later, started my own org. As most amateur orgs start as, it was just a hobby, but it quickly turned into a business. And in the meantime, I was also just starting my engineering career. So over the next 5 years, I juggled both building my business, which, funny enough, the name of our org was Armada,
Right.
right? And we could get into that later, but no, I wasn't aware of Full Sail Armada just yet when we started the org. But and we spent our first couple of years like fielding teams in lots of different game titles, just learning how these communities operated, how well do these publishers support their esports scenes, and also what are the salary demands like
Yeah.
what is the business case for these different titles. And eventually we found our niche in Smash, and that was our bread and butter. We felt like we could make the biggest impact with a really awesome grassroots community, and that's where we focused really the last 2 to 3 years of our organization, while also building out a content creator vertical. So yeah, you mentioned working as an engineer. I was working as a corporate quality employee for Chrysler, and then also for a tier one automotive supplier also during that time. So Armada was really my 5 to midnight,
Yep.
and it was a grind. But I learned so much. I traveled to so many different Dream Hacks,
Yeah.
PAX, TwitchCon, you name it. Just that network that I was able to build was just so valuable, and the grind was worth it. And I eventually found my way into collegiate towards the end of it.
Yeah, and you know, it's such an interesting path because so many people, myself included in this, that I've interviewed on this show, all have a very similar story. Is that this was a passion. I was doing XYZ over here, and at the same time, I'm building both avenues until this one was big enough to take over, right? And that definitely seems kind of like your same journey here, where you had to do both. You were operating in two things, and were able to then eventually let the passion project take over, which I think a lot of folks, especially young, students that are just graduating from college and wanting to dive first into the world of esports, having to come to that realization that there is a balance between some things. Okay, hey, I've got to go pay my bills, got to take care of things. I'm going to continue to work on this passion, and obviously that is how those avenues open, those doors open. And for yourself, I mean, finding or founding your own org obviously was a huge avenue for you to continue to build that passion project. When did you cross over and go kind of full-time esports?
Yeah, that happened because of collegiate esports.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I ran Armada with my co-founder for 5 years, and primarily I was focused on building content creation vertical, handling sponsorships and partnerships, and just general operations of the org on a day-to-day basis. But ultimately, it is tough trying to be an org that is trying to find its niche in a tier two scene.
Yeah.
It's the tier two space of esports. There's never been a business case that makes sense to really build a business around that. So we did kind of find our niche in Smash, which was great because we actually were able to compete at a tier one level in Smash, and we had at our peak 5 top 50 global players in the world. And we signed a lot of great Smash content creators. So we built a really strong community, and we're able to deliver a lot of value to sponsors. But ultimately, if you don't have access to funding verticals
Yeah.
like VC, and we did also we our focus was how do we find a way to help build the space but build it sustainably and make sure we're making sustainable decisions as an organization. And that's why we were able to survive for a full 5 years as an org with very little funding, just basically seed round funding. But really, that actually kind of sunsetted just as I entered full time collegiate esports. So, how I got into collegiate is my undergrad, Michigan Tech, they announced they were launching a varsity program. And after they had hired somebody, I'd reached out and just said, "Hey, I'm Riley. I've got a long background in esports, helping run a company in the space right now. Willing to help any way that's needed, right?" They took that offer, and I started helping with recruitment and building out some broadcasting initiatives. And then they quickly brought me on board as a part-time assistant director. I helped work remotely to help support, and once again continue to build recruitment initiatives and broadcast initiatives. And then eventually kind of hit a breaking point where they were going to potentially offer me a full-time job to be an assistant director of esports. But I really wanted to, if I was going to make the jump, I wanted the opportunity to run my own program.
Right.
And fortunately, a good friend, Adam Mantor, he was on his way out at Aquinas College,
Yeah.
and an opportunity opened up to move to Grand Rapids, Michigan, which my wife went to Grand Valley State University for undergrad, which is in Grand Rapids, and we already had a good foundation here of friends and family. So made the leap. Ended up quitting my engineering job, and going full time collegiate esports, and taking on the opportunity to be the head coach and director of esports at a small private school
Yeah.
out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So that's kind of how that transition happened, and I've been full time collegiate ever since.
Yeah, and you guys won in 2021 the NACE National Championship for Counter-Strike, right?
Yeah, that was actually at Michigan Tech.
Right, that's
So
right.
funny enough, and one of my whys of why I think collegiate is the future and the backbone of our industry, is my brother had found himself becoming a pro at 16 years old. But there was so much volatility in that the staying power of a pro career is so rare.
Yeah.
So he had, ended up foregoing college to continue to try to make it as a pro and sustain himself as a pro, and missed out on some of those opportunities
Yeah.
to progress towards an education. So fortunately, when he decided to retire, Michigan Tech had a very good Counter Strike team and was recruiting for Counter Strike. So my brother actually went up to Michigan Tech on a really good scholarship.
Awesome.
And kind of my first year there, I joined him at Michigan Tech, and we were able to win a NACE National Championship, which was super cool. And that was actually a part of my very first involvement with NACE when I actually started serving on one of our power rankings committees for Counter Strike.
That's
But
that.
it's just was really cool to see how
Yeah.
my brother could take that skill set, and use that to give himself a new direction in life, and start building a career while still playing the game that he loves.
Yeah. What a full circle moment too for the the both of you, right? Like he's there on scholarship playing, you're over helping oversee, and then to win the whole thing, that's had to feel really really good.
Yeah, it was an awesome experience. I'll remember it forever.
So what inspired you to continue that? Like obviously you could have stayed there, but it was really. I mean, you mentioned wanting to run your own program, have be the one to call all the shots. Was that really the main inspiration, or were you looking to take on other administrative roles within collegiate esports?
Yeah, I think that was my initial goal, and also location mattered.
Yeah.
I loved my time at Michigan Tech up in the Upper Peninsula, of Michigan, but it's way up there, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it just wasn't really in the cards for us to location wise, and it made a lot more sense to go to Grand Rapids, and then also just for me to have the opportunity to run my own program. I really wanted to experience that, and be the person that everything relied on. And but ultimately, as I continued to jump into the space, and see how quickly it was growing, and see how much of a positive impact it was having on the students that I was working with. I always wanted to find ways to get more and more involved, right? And so that included, while at Michigan Tech, serving on a power rankings committee to drive attention around the Counter Strike offerings for NACE. Eventually, started serving on our eligibility enforcement committee when I
Yep.
started at Aquinas, and getting more involved on setting best practices and raising the standards of varsity level competition. And basically found myself always doing something on
Yeah.
the side, volunteering in mostly subcommittees within NACE. Just because I've always been really bought into NACE's mission and what we're trying to do, and really the future of the space that we're trying to build.
Yeah.
So yeah, always was doing something on the side, even after stepping away from being an engineer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that, and I think that's always something that we talk about too on the show is like trying to leave the space better than you found it, and it absolutely seems like that's the mantra for you, going from one thing to the next and continuing to evolve. We got a question here from Jacob is Nachos. He asks, "What are some lessons that you learned while running a pro esports org that you're still using as the NACE interim executive director?"
Oh man, that's a good question. I think there's a lot that we can take away, both good and bad, on how the pro scene has evolved and changed
Yeah.
over the years. I think my main takeaway and the model I've always had is trying to take a sustainable approach when it comes to decision making. So, making sure that the decisions that we're making are going to be lasting,
Hmm.
and that really, no matter, I guess, in Armada, for example, when we signed a team, we wanted to make sure that, or signed a player, we want to make sure if that player continued to overperform and get better, we had the resources to continue to invest in them,
Right.
pay them what they're worth, and make sure that we were, like I said, setting ourselves up for success and also not contributing to issues in our space. So I think just taking a sustainable approach to decision making is something I've tried to take, in my opportunity here at NACE. Just making sure we're thinking about decisions from a lens of the long term, right? Our mission is focused on elevating varsity esports, right, and ensuring that esports becomes a generational component of higher education for years and years and years to come, right? So we have a responsibility to take a sustainable approach, not only to make sure we can stay healthy as an organization, but we're also promoting healthy things for our space and how our space will evolve. So I think that's my main takeaway,
Yeah.
right? Is sustainable decision making.
Yeah, absolutely, and I like that because it really is investing. It's doubling down on collegiate esports and really putting the time and effort to make that sustainable. So, very excited that you're in that place, and obviously you made that transition from coaching to now running and becoming the assistant director of RecWell Esports at Grand Valley State University. Talk to me about that transition. How did that go? How did that opportunity come about? You talk about location being important and a big part of that decision for you. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, that transition happened when, after almost a year being with Aquinas, Grand Valley gave me a call. And a lot of people watching may know Chris Bilski. He runs Michigan State's program. Previously, he was the guy at Grand Valley, right? So it was kind of a similar thing where Adam had left
Yep.
Aquinas, an opportunity opened up, and I applied for that opportunity. Well, Chris left Grand Valley, and Grand Valley gave me a call because they knew I was down the road. That opportunity at the opportunity at Grand Valley is very different than my previous experience at Aquinas and at Michigan Tech. Both at Michigan Tech and Aquinas, our programs were under athletics,
Yep.
but at Grand Valley, the esports program here is under recreation and wellness, and you see that at a lot of larger public schools. Is programs are starting somewhere else.
Yeah.
They're starting under student life, they're starting under student affairs, and that was the case here at Grand Valley. So, obviously, I was a little skeptical of, hey, I didn't have a lot of experience working in higher education. What I really know is esports and hyper competitive gaming.
Yeah.
But here's an opportunity to take on a new challenge and learn about the importance of student engagement, find ways to take gaming and esports and use it as a tool to impact so many more students, right? So that's what the Grand Valley opportunity was all about. So basically, a week after they called me, I eventually accepted a job offer, and Grand Valley is only about 25 minutes west of Aquinas. So it was a pretty easy
Yeah.
transition to jump over, to that new opportunity. And I've been at Grand Valley for about 2.5 years now, and originally started as a esports coordinator. Right, so I
Yeah.
went from being a director of a program to being a coordinator, which in higher education is usually an entry level role, which is pretty common at a lot of larger institutions. But it showed that there was an opportunity for growth,
Yeah.
right? An opportunity to continue to explain, hey, why is esports important to support, and how can we take the program from where it's at now and grow it, and realize its potential. And so, starting at Grand Valley and coming here, we're based in recreation and wellness. We have an esports center on campus that was opened up in 2021.
Yeah.
And then we had a club program of hundreds of students, a very large club program, and had around 10 competitive teams competing. And really, my focus over the past 2 years has been, let's grow our program into more than just a recreational
Yeah.
activity. Let's continue to meet our students where their needs are, which is they want to compete at a higher level, right? And they want to receive more opportunities to do that, and they want to be showcased through broadcast initiatives. So that's really been my focus. Is we built out a new broadcast studio in partnership with the School of Communications, and then also built out a pilot varsity program that we're into, deep into year 2 of right now. So it's been a really cool experience to see, going from a medium size D1 school, D2 school under athletics, to then a small private school under athletics, and now to a large D2 public school under student affairs. It's been really cool to see how esports is perceived,
Yeah.
and the kind of the different goals that a program may have based
Yeah.
on the institution that they're at.
Yeah, and that is really true because especially with a lot of the other directors that have been on the show and just being in that space and talking to everyone, each school is very different. There's different requirements, there's different goals, there's different things that they are focusing on. So you kind of have to figure out where your avenue is, and it sounds like what you're doing is great, and you're expanding. How is that balance, though? Obviously, with focusing on recreation, wellness, and now really heavily into the competitive side. How have taken that balance in your position with what you're trying to build?
Yeah, it's tough. It's kind of like, being a founder of a startup. I mean, everything relies on you, everything stops at you, and everything goes when you go.
Yep.
So that's really what it's been. Is, hey, let's find a way to grow the program. And some of the measurables we've had, we went through 180 unique students participating in our program to now 500 over the course of 2.5 years. And we've grown from 10 competitive teams to now 20, 17 club and 3 varsity.
Wow.
So it's working, right? But the next challenge, which is kind of where we're in right now, is how do we go get more resources to make sure we can continue to sustain this, and that everything doesn't stop at me, right?
Yeah.
And that we can bring in some GAs, potentially bring in a coordinator, and find an opportunity to give more people some responsibility on overseeing some of the operations, overseeing some efforts from the teams standpoint, so that I can focus more efforts on the vision of the program, soliciting donors, sourcing new sponsorships and partnerships, some of the bigger picture stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure everything that you've been doing with NACE now has added to not only your plate of responsibilities, but also what I think more globally you're trying to accomplish, right? This brings another level to your efforts and your initiatives, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's challenging, right?
Yeah,
You know, the, NACE is a very important organization to our space, right?
yeah,
So I take this opportunity very, very seriously. And because of that, yeah, I'm working a lot of hours, but it's something I knew that I was signing up for, and it's something that's not new to me. I
right,
mean, I talked about Armada being my 5 to midnight.
right.
NACE is like that in some ways right now. So it's nothing new to me, but I'm looking forward to the time of having one full time job.
Yeah.
But that day will come eventually.
One
Who knows when
day.
that day will be?
One day it will come for sure. Well, you've been involved with NACE. I mean, obviously prior to the executive director aspect, you've been involved. You were on the member eligibility enforcement committee, and you had a couple other supporting roles through that. From your vantage point now as the interim executive director, what is your main goal? What are you really trying to accomplish and try to support with your time here and your dedication?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that rely on NACE's home office. We have a lot of great leadership groups that do so much work and historically have done so much work to get us to the point that we are as an organization. So, really, just doing my best to support our leadership groups. I'm in all of our leadership group meetings, making sure they have what they need to make decisions and be successful and continue to push us forward. And then also just be there for my home office team, right? We have a team of full-time staff members, part-time staff members, and they need a leader that's making sure we're keeping things on the track, and that we're setting priorities and there's alignment internally. So first and foremost, that's been my focus, is just making sure that we're going to keep moving forward and we can keep the lights on. But also looking at other strategic initiatives as we move into next year, as we move into a new strategic planning cycle, as we move into budget planning. I have my own perspective and ideas of initiatives that I think we should pursue. And also, our landscape is starting to evolve and change in collegiate.
Hmm.
And we have a responsibility as an organization to understand how we should react to that. So there's absolutely, that's a component to the role as well. But being an interim executive director, my primary responsibility is making sure that we continue to move forward.
Yeah. As you see the space evolving, what are you more in your role at the university excited about? Less on the NACE side, but more about the overall involvement of an evolution of collegiate esports.
Yeah, and this actually kind of ties into what I'm excited about of NACE and our industry in general, which is at Grand Valley we have the opportunity to play in our traditional athletic conference, which has been a really cool experience. And in fact, when I was at Aquinas, we also played in our traditional athletic conference, and they fully supported it as a supported sport. So that's been really cool to see that grow. We just got through year 3 of our GLIAC championships, which is our athletic conference. So it's just really cool to have a group of schools that are all committed to esports and are all supported in different ways. We have around half of our conference members that are under athletics, and the other half are under student life or student affairs. But seeing that grow and seeing the experiences that's creating for our students, whether that's friendships with some of those other
Yeah.
programs that we're playing every single year, or rivalries that are created. We have our traditional rivalry against Ferris State. They're about an hour north of us. And boy, has that quickly turned into an esports rivalry
Oh yeah.
that was actually some pretty heated moments at our championship this past month. So I'm personally really excited to see that continue to grow. Right now, we're just playing a weekend championship event once a year, but we're looking to grow that into regular season play come this next year. We actually had another meeting earlier today. So that's what I'm personally excited about, continuing to explore what does athletic conference play mean in the world of esports, and is that going to be a trend that continues, and is that going to be something that schools start to look for as their main regular season experience?
And you talked about earlier about your broadcast initiative. What sort of opportunities are there for students like in your programs? I know obviously having 17 club programs and 3 varsity is huge. That's insane. What are other opportunities is there? We always at Full Sail talk about there's so much more to esports than just being good at the game, right? And we want to try to give that breadth to our students. What sort of opportunities does that leave for students in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I think there's two main aspects to this. One is that we still have a bit of a blended model where ultimately we have sponsored the esports club as a sponsored recreation and wellness club, and a part of that is our club program, and a part of that is our varsity program. So they're kind of all under the same umbrella,
Right.
but that's really cool because we have a student organization that allows students to step up into these leadership positions and facilitate operations of registration, and that includes supporting both club teams and varsity
Yeah.
teams, and we have an e-board obviously as well that makes some high level decisions. We have game leader positions, which are student positions that are specific to each game title, and they run events in our space, but they also help oversee all of our competitive teams. There's a lot of great student leadership opportunities within our club structure, which has been really cool to see. But on the flip side, I also employ students. You know,
Yeah.
I have a student staff budget, so I have multiple social media staff member. We actually had our first social media coordinator that we hired over a year and a half ago, just get a full time job for a local company because of the work that he had done with our esports program, which was so cool to see.
Yeah.
And with our broadcast initiative, that is fully student run broadcast. So that includes two main staff positions, which is broadcaster, producer, and floor manager.
Yeah.
So we have two producers and two floor managers. And we actually have a control room, which is what the broadcast producer manages all the bells and whistles. But then we also have a full set that we've built out that is kind of it's in the same large room, but it's kind of a separate space where our
Yeah.
floor manager gets to own all of the cameras and setting up and tearing down the set and setting up lighting. It's just a really cool hands-on learning experience that they're getting paid for. And then of course we offer casting opportunities, which we don't require any experience for. So if you're interested in trying it, we'll throw you on stream and we'll equip you with with the information you need, to be a little bit dangerous. But yeah, that's our program is built on that, is just providing students the opportunity to gain those experiential learning skills, which we all know are very translatable into getting real career skills.
Absolutely, and I love that. We're the same way with casting. Like, hey, we have a program that if you're really interested, we have the Dan Patrick School of Sports Casting, and that is very traditional. But with esports, we get students that are both very very interested in traditional sports but also want to do this, and people that are, hey, I'm in creative writing but I love casting smash, so let's just jump in. And I think that's so important. Like, let's have fun, let's make the mistakes now and learn as we go through this and create opportunities, because you never know when that light switch is going to flip and they go, well, this is my future, this is what I'm doing, this is my second job thing, right? Like, this is that
Yeah.
other thing that we're gonna do throughout the time. So, for you, looking at the space, I think we all get to see the collegiate space from a different vantage point. From your perspective, how can universities better support esports programs and their student athletes?
Oh boy, that is a loaded question.
It is. I'm sorry.
You know, no, no, you're good. I think we still have a duty to continue to help educate people what esports is and what esports isn't.
Yeah.
I know we've come a long way, and we've gone through the initial mainstream phase of mainstream reacting to esports and all of the stereotypes that were spun out. I think we have come a long way, but in terms of stakeholders and decision makers at institutions, we still need to be able to answer that question of why do we support competitive esports at a high level. A lot of us get it, right?
Yep.
And a lot of us know how impactful it is for our students and some of the outcomes on retention, engagement, uh, career interest, career opportunities that it presents, and some of those critical skills that it can teach, whether soft skills or hard skills. But I think we need to do a better job of being able to capture data and show that data to stakeholders at institutions to explain truly how much value is this providing to your institution, right? So I think we have a responsibility there to do a better job at that. And I see NACE as an organization that should own a responsibility in doing that as well. Um, but ultimately, if it came to like where do I think more resources would help, I think when you look at varsity esports, a lot of us that have worked at programs, it's a very challenging job to be an esports director at a school where you got to oversee, 6 different teams, and you may
Hmm.
or may not have a budget for coaching staff, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of burnout associated with that role if you don't manage that very carefully, and if you don't find creative ways to get students involved in taking on some of that responsibility. So I think the biggest help would be just additional resources for the foundation of your program, and being able to bring on, invest more into coaches, um, invest more into GAs, and just invest more into staff in general so that programs can be more sustainable and not solely reliant on one person that may or may not leave after a year, and you kind of have to hit the reset button. So I think that's where the resources could be used the best
Yeah.
across the board, is just providing a more sustainable foundation from a staffing perspective, so these programs can continue to grow and thrive, and that's sustainable over time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's huge, and especially from like an investment standpoint from the school. If you're going to invest in someone to run this program, you don't want them leaving in a year, right? You want them sticking around to continue to build your program. But if they're going to get sniped by another a university that has a better offer, you have to consider those types of things, which I totally agree with. We do have a question here from Lugnut. She asks, "How has your family life impacted your balance?"
Yeah, you know, admittedly, it's a challenging thing to juggle, right? Especially when esports lives at night,
Yep.
right? That's when everything happens. I think what has helped is transitioning from running an athletics program to running a program under student affairs, and the emphasis here on providing opportunities to students to take on more responsibility. And I'm also fortunate that I do have a couple part-time coaches that can help oversee the efforts of our teams in the evening. So I'm fortunate in that I can work a relatively balanced schedule. Of course, there's a lot of fires that still come up in the evenings, and there's a lot of calls that I get, at least like when it comes to my Grand Valley job. But I think the key there has been, trying to be okay with not getting everything done, right? We all know there's always more to do. So setting clear boundaries of myself to say, if I'm coming in at 8, 9 o'clock, my goal is to leave at 5 o'clock, and I will pick up that work again tomorrow. And like I said, there's a lot of evenings where there's still things that come up. I like to tune into a lot of our streams, and if I see something that breaks, it's hard for me not to call one of my producers and help them fix it. But
Yeah.
it's obviously more challenging what I've been taking on with the NACE role. But just finding opportunities to say, hey, we're going to spend some family time this weekend or on Saturday or Sunday, and just making sure we set time aside to just totally step away from esports. I think that's been really critical, but it's been challenging, especially having a 1 year old. But I'm lucky that my family is super supportive. My wife has been very supportive of my esports journey since we've been together for the past 10 years now. So she's been with me through and through, and she understands it, and she's super supportive of it. But we also have great family members that my mother, her mother, come over to help watch our little guy on a week to week basis. So without that support system, I probably couldn't do
Yeah.
what I'm doing today. So just eternally appreciative of their support.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that support goes a long way. I know I don't have kids myself, but my sister, she lives out in Montana, and my parents are out there with her, and they count on that. So I know that's a huge thing. So with your life in corporate and then obviously esports, have you really seen a whole lot of kind of crossover of important lessons that you're learning between those two fields?
Oh boy, life skills and in esports. Yeah, I would say that importance of trying to find balance and self awareness in general. I had many years where I made the same mistake, and I call this time of the year burnout season, because if you don't pay attention to your mental health, if you're not self aware enough of when things are starting to become challenging for you, and you don't take action to change them, you're going to get burnt out. right? And when that happens, everyone suffers, right? You suffer, people around you suffer, the students that rely on you suffer. So I think generally that's what I've been uh, really keen on, is trying to continue to find balance wherever I can find it, and making sure that I'm being self-aware of when I'm doing too much,
Yeah.
and making sure I'm being intentional about setting time and space aside for me to decompress. Whether that's spending time with family, whether that's hopping in Discord with my buddy and playing some Rocket League games,
Right.
right? We need time to step away. And as somebody that's an introvert, I know myself very well. I need time to step away if I'm going to be my best self when it matters most.
Yeah, definitely great advice. The I always try to come at it from all of the different angles, from content to esports to just work in general, and it does get heavy sometimes. So having that space and time for yourself to re-energize is super important. You talked earlier today about your time building Armada Esports, and one of the things that you kept mentioning was content creation, and this was very early on. You tend to see content creators leaning heavily into the side of esports organizations now. Back then, what was the catalyst for that for you? And do you still see that as an avenue into esports?
Yeah, it's tricky at the time. What a lot of pro teams did is they would sign one, two, three, big creators, and primarily it was a way to just add to their sponsorship portfolio and have a creator that has really large reach, that can help bolster that portfolio, and they can go secure sponsorships off of that. We had a slightly different approach where we saw an opportunity. One, we didn't have the resources to go out and sign big creators. So we had the opportunity to find ways, how can we support micro creators
Mhm.
in our space, right? So what our focus was is in the primary game titles that we focused in, which eventually just basically became Smash, and that was our main creator vertical that we focused on. Is how do we find some creators in the space that are doing some really cool stuff, and find ways to bring them all together, and find ways for them to collaborate on
Yeah.
content and help each other grow, but at the same time also find ways that we can provide value to them, whether that's in the form of any type of product from one of our sponsors, any promotion that we could do of them, and also finding ways to tie, their fandom and their brand, to help support some of our competitive players and help them grow their branding as well, and teach them how to potentially become a creator themselves. So really focused on integrating all of those pieces, rather than just see it as an opportunity just to create a vertical and sell sponsorships off of it. Of course, that's another outcome that comes out of that.
Right.
But our core focus was truly, how do we help to build a community in this title? And that was one of the main ways we did it. We ended up building a content creation team of 30 creators. They were all under 100 CCV. And it was just really cool to see how often they would collaborate.
Yeah.
And many of the creators also tuning in and supporting our players at different tournaments that they would travel to.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's definitely a great way to look at it, is that collaboration aspect, and not just trying to, add another level to what you're doing. Because once you have people that are invested in your organization and what you're doing, it's going to definitely continue to evolve, which is really cool. You also mentioned earlier about rivalries and creating some fun rivalries with your current program. What sort of like advice do you give to other institutions that are looking to build those things, and doing that in a let's say professional manner versus just trash talking? How do you foster those collaborations between other schools that you want to continue to build something with?
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend, start with, if you're at a school that is a part of a traditional athletic conference, start there. We A large percentage of schools that do have athletics programs, they're going to have a traditional rivalry that goes back years, some cases 100 years, right? Or even more than that if you're looking at something like Ohio State versus Michigan. So I would say start there. And if you're at a school that doesn't have athletics or doesn't have a traditional rivalry, you be in a new athletic conference. Just look around regionally. What are some schools nearby that support esports and may also already play in one of the leagues you play in, such as NACE. Find an opportunity to create a really cool, authentic event, especially if they're only 30 minutes, an hour away. Organize an on-campus event where you have, you play against that school across 5 different game titles, and whoever first wins 3 out of 5 wins the event. We do this at Grand Valley with 2 schools, with Ferris State, who is our traditional athletics rival, but also with Western Michigan University, who's a Division I public school, and we don't have any traditional affiliations with. But we do the same event with both of them every year. So with Western Michigan, we have our Laker Bronco campus clash, where we send a couple teams down there on a Saturday, and then on Sunday we have a couple teams come up at our place. And once again, whoever wins 3 out of the 5 titles wins the overall event. And then also with Ferris State, we have a Anchorbone Classic week where we play each other in football, and we try to sync up that event to be during that same week as well to kind of capitalize on the energy and hype. So that's my recommendation. Start with looking at your traditional athletic conference if you have one. If not, just look around to nearby schools that you're probably already playing
Yeah.
in some of those leagues and invite them out.
Yeah, in-person competition always a great way to beef up those rivalries. We've got another question from the chat. This one comes from Sari. She asks, you mentioned something that I think is really interesting and so important. There is so much opportunity in this space. How do you navigate which opportunities to take or take advantage of or prioritize so that you don't get overwhelmed with it all?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in the context of NACE, for example, it all has to start with, what is our mission, right? And the focus should be on what things can help us achieve that mission, right? And at NACE, with our focus on varsity esports, I think the opportunities we see are how can we continue to double down on the high level of standards that we set and reinforce our systems, so that we continue to raise the bar and raise the standard of our space. And then when it comes to exploring new opportunities, it's just being able to be aware of and react to how our space is evolving and how those trends may be influencing NACE, and or how NACE needs to react to those trends. Um, so I think ultimately you start with making sure that whatever that thing is, if you need to react to it, then especially as a nonprofit association, it has to be something tied to our mission. And so I think it's that's where it starts with. There is a lot of opportunity in collegiate, both at continuing to grow at the public school level. There's still a large percentage of large public schools that still really don't support esports at a varsity level yet or
Yeah.
anywhere close to it, right? So our opportunity is continue showing why it's important, and not only leading by example by providing really meaningful regular season and national level competition, but also finding ways to continue to promote the good in our space, promote the good that our members are doing, elevate their stories, and then also I touched on earlier, but find ways to continue to explain the why
Yeah.
of esports, and do that with a data-driven approach. So yeah, I think that's our focus, but at least looking through a lens from NACE is let's make sure this is tied to our mission, and that'll help narrow our focus on what's important in terms of a long-term strategic plan.
Yeah, I like that. Now, for something that we actually talked about this when you were here in Florida for the NACE event, and uh, at Full Sail we've been lucky to have some graduates go out and start running programs at other institutions, and you're starting to see that more, where people are interested in working in the esports realm, more on the organizational side and administrative side, in the collegiate space. What sort of advice would you give to anyone that is trying to kind of simulate like your journey, and get into this, and create opportunities for themselves in the collegiate space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's been a lot of conversation of this over the years of, you know, the the lack of compensation and how it's difficult to justify moving from, if I already have an established career, how can I justify taking a huge pay cut, and take a job that at times could be a grind.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that's important to recognize is that we have a lot of people in traditional sports that experience the same barriers and the same challenges. And as somebody that got to know a lot of my colleagues working at a small private school in athletics, a lot of my colleagues also weren't making very much money and also had a long-winded journey even to get to that point. So I'm actually very optimistic that there is a lot of opportunity in esports to get into some of these entry level roles, compared to how hard it is in traditional sports. Just to get into some level, even assistant coach
Yeah.
for an NAI football team, for example. In some cases, you have to be like an ex NFL player. Like it is so difficult. So I'm actually personally very optimistic that there is so much opportunity in esports. But my advice for people would be, you still need to find a way to get some experience under your belt. And whether that is, if you're somebody that's graduated from college, uh, see if your undergrad has a program. If they have a program, just reach out and say, hey, I'm an alum and I just want to find any way to help out. Whether you need somebody to manage your League of Legends team, or you need somebody to help with social media, just if you have the time, volunteer your time with some sort of network you have. If you have a connection, somebody that works in the space, or like I said, start with your alumni. I think that's the best way to get involved. And you'd be surprised with how new our space is. You don't necessarily need 5, 10 years of experience to get a program director job. Just getting some experience, so it could be volunteer experience or assistant coaching experience at a school, can go a very, very long way. So that's my recommendation: is find a way to get involved.
Yeah.
If you have the capacity and time and you're in a privileged enough position to do that, take advantage of that, and dedicate some of your time to helping push our space forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people forget that your time is experience, and putting time in with hey, I'm going to be a coach with my undergrad, and it's volunteer, right? Like that's still experience. You're still gaining things. You should still be putting that on your resume if you're going for these types of roles. So great advice. We have another question from Rogue Kabili. I probably said that wrong, but with new games always on the rise and also old games sometimes dying and also losing interest, what's the method for us to keep on board and on top of the always changing scene?
Yeah, this is a challenging one, right? This is one of the reasons why esports is a very challenging industry, right?
Yep.
Games are constantly changing in popularity, and publishers are constantly changing their games as well, right? And have a lot of control over their games. They basically have control over multiple sports, right? Which is a challenge that traditional sports doesn't face. But I think when it comes down to keeping an eye on trends of popularity, there's some ways online that you can look at player base, whether that's Steam charts, right? That's an obvious one, to get a good understanding of, is a game growing or is it dying, or is it steady. But generally, at least when it comes to collegiate esports, there are kind of some staple titles that have solidified themselves at the varsity level, right? You've got Valorant, you've got Rocket League, you've got League of Legends, you've got Overwatch, you've got Call of Duty that's been around for a long time and has been really popular when it comes to CCL, which is Call of Duty League, um, and and Smash really
Right.
is one that has really exploded in collegiate the last couple of years, and I think is only going to get bigger. So I think we're kind of at the point we've got a really good understanding of what those core esports titles are going to be at the collegiate level for a while now. But it is our duty to continue to watch and closely watch new titles like Rivals, for
Yeah, I was gonna
example, right?
say.
And that title has exploded in popularity, and but it's our duty, especially when it comes to NACE, it's our duty to make sure that we, if we're going to offer a title, it should be a title that we can sustainably offer for years and years and years to come, and we think it's going to be a core aspect of the future of varsity esports, right? So we're going to be inherently a little slower moving than other organizations, because we truly want to make sure that's going to be a staple title for years
Yeah.
to come, and that we can give the confidence to our members to say, yes, you should start investing in infrastructure around a rivals team, right? You should start investing in a coach. You should invest in new scholarships. We want to make sure that we're protecting our members in that way, and that we need to truly believe in the staying power of a title before we're ready to make the jump.
Absolutely. So we've got about 5 minutes left here. So we're do a little bit of a rapid fire round, but obviously I want to give you an opportunity to share where people can find you, how to reach out, do all of those things. So we'll kind of do a rapid fire question here. What's your thoughts on the esports scholarship and their role in the competitive gaming aspect of collegiate esports?
Yeah, I mean, scholarships are critical, right? Especially when it comes to varsity esports. Students are putting a lot of time to be able to compete at a varsity level, and they're juggling a lot of priorities in life. And especially as higher education becomes more and more expensive, more and more students are having to work multiple part-time jobs on the side, just to be able to actually pay the bills, right? So I think scholarships are that critical component that really allows you to deliver value back to the student for all the work that they're putting in, and allow them to, potentially not have to go work a part-time job,
Yeah.
and be able to focus, not only on their craft but also on academics. So I think it's very, very critical, and it's a core part of varsity esports to make sure students have the ability to truly commit and buy into a team over the course of 4 years.
Absolutely. And for yourself, from more of a personal level, on this journey that you've been on, which has been incredible, what's one moment or highlight in your career that really just stands out to you as a particular moment that was meaningful or transformative?
Oh man. Um, I mean, one that definitely sticks out is just my first time in collegiate, and just getting involved with Michigan Tech for the first time as somebody that spent, years just grinding in the pro scene, trying to build a brand, building a business. Um, it can be really discouraging at times when you see, the ups and downs of the professional scene, and the challenges that the pro scene were facing, but to get that initial glimpse into, being able to give my time back to my alma mater and work with students that I was in their shoes, not only, 4 or 5 years ago, and be able to see the opportunities that they were being given and their ability to take their passions and turn it into something really meaningful, whether that meant they're on scholarship or they were a student assistant or one of our statistics students. We had a bunch of student roles there, and just seeing them being able to apply their passion, while they're at school, and be able to have a structure set up that allows them to manage both and be successful in both areas. It just really clicked for me that this just makes too much sense. This is so valuable for the students, and when you look at, I worked with a lot of tier 2 players back in the day, and it is so hard being a tier 2 player where you're like maybe getting $100 a month, $200 a month. A lot of cases, you're just getting a couple keyboards and,
Yeah.
and headsets a month, and just the value that a school can provide and fill that gap in the tier 2 or tier 3 scenes of our industry, being able to progress towards a degree, it just made too much sense, right? And really, ever since then, I just wanted to find a way. How can I continue to help that space grow? And hopefully, in the long term, it provides more opportunities for people to still pursue trying to become a pro in esports, but at the same time, getting something really valuable out of it, which is a college degree.
Absolutely. Well, Riley, man, always a pleasure talking to you, man. Really, really good stuff. Where can everyone find you? How can someone reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, at Dizzy, Dizzyee. I think there's two E's there on Twitter, and then on LinkedIn, you can just type in my name, Riley Long, on LinkedIn. Send me a connection. I'll accept it. Always looking to grow my network. So those are the two platforms I use the most.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Our next episode will air on the 20th, featuring Shipley from Maryville University. He is the esports creative director. So that'll be a great show. So be sure to tune in. Riley, again, thank you so much for being here, man. And we will see you all next time.